The First Opium War, the role of tea in shaping history. The First Opium War, China's tea leads to a war. Chinese tea has played an important role in modern Chinese history and even in modern world history. The First Opium War in modern China was not unrelated to tea. The British loved Chinese tea and had to pay a huge monetary price for it, but the British were not willing to do so, hence the opium trade and the Opium Wars. At the beginning of the 18th century, the East India Company established a trading post in China. You can directly import tea from China, so the British tea imports climbed straight up, the price fell all the way down, for the tea to approach the wider public to create the necessary conditions. Thus, tea gradually became the pillar of British imports from China, resulting in a huge deficit in trade between the two countries. In order to ensure the supply of tea in China, to eliminate this trade deficit, the British government introduced a policy of trading opium for tea, a large number of exports of opium harmful to China. In those 2 years, the export of tea from Wuyi, Fujian reached its peak. But what was exchanged for tea was not silver, but opium. The long-term trade of opium for tea caused a large outflow of silver from the Qing Dynasty. The treasury was empty, the price of silver rose, the country was poor, and the people were in dire straits. At that time, some towns and cities in China, where there were many tobacco shops and thousands of opium-smoking heavy smokers, aroused a great deal of attention from the Qing court. In December 1838, Emperor Daoguang appointed Lin Zexu as an imperial official to Guangzhou to investigate the source of opium, and eventually seized more than 20,000 boxes of opium, and implemented the destruction of opium in human, which lasted for 22 days. This is the famous human smokeout in history. This move was strongly resisted by the representatives of the East India Company and other British merchants, who jointly pressurized the British government to expand the opening of trade and increase the number of ports of entry, hoping to protect the tea trade on the principle of free trade, and used this as a reason to start a war. After the first spring rains, when the Wuyi mountain tea farmers are busy picking the most tender tea leaves, but they do not know, their hands of small tea leaves will trigger a war, which is the history of the First Opium War. After the war began, the majority of soldiers and officers bravely resisted the war and actively carry out the anti-invasion struggle. But due to the Qing court and the war is not sure, generals and commanders are not good at commanding. The method of war is dull, coupled with backward weapons and equipment, and ultimately for the British Army was defeated. In 1842, the Qing government was forced to sign the Sino-British Treaty of Nanjing, marking the failure of the First Opium War and turning the most humiliating page in Chinese history. In short, the First Opium War was actually a war caused by the trade of tea between China and Britain. Politically autonomous China, territorial sovereignty was destroyed, self-sufficient natural economy disintegrated. China began to fall into semi-colonial, semi-feudal society. This is also a turning point in the Qing Dynasty, the rise and fall of foreign tea trade. A small piece of tea has unknowingly changed the course of China's modern history. Tea for the far-reaching impact of China's modern history, it is also worth thinking about.